Good morning. I would like to welcome all those who are virtually participating in this special session of the Africa Debate. This year, I have the great pleasure of welcoming President João Lourenço, the President of Angola, for a special dialogue organized thanks to the partnership with the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, with the participation of its patron himself. We are all aware of the enormous potential of the Angolan economy, Africa's fifth largest, well demonstrated since the end of the devastating wars that ravaged the country until 2002. After the successful investment promotion event just held under the auspices of Invest Africa yesterday, this is a session that will serve as the highlight of the Africa Debate for this year. We have, for about an hour, the opportunity of understanding better from these two distinguished guests the dynamics that are influencing the recent evolution of the country. I would like to start by asking Tony Blair about his institute, why he decided to establish it, and why is he so interested and involved with Africa's transformation agenda?
I governed as Prime Minister of the UK for 10 years. And you learn an awful lot doing a job like that. And the single most important thing I learned was the challenge of governing. And that challenge is essentially, you can have great vision for the country, but how do you translate that vision into reality? And we introduced, when I was in government, a whole series of changes in the structure of government to allow us to prioritize better, to develop better policy, and to make sure once we'd established those priorities, that we had a system for performance management of their implementation. In other words, how you followed the thing through and tracked it so that you knew that what you were promising was happening was actually happening. And this is the lesson I learned in government, and I established afterwards the Institute with the idea of helping countries rise to the challenge of reform. And because of the interest I had in Africa, it was a major part of my premiership. We trebled aid to Africa. I devoted the G7 of 2005 to Africa. We established the African Commission. Because of all of that, I wanted particularly to do this in Africa, and today we do it in 15, soon to be 20 different countries. We've just started our project in Angola, which is very exciting for us, but it's all to do with how you get things done, how you provide effective change for your people. Because in the end, the quality of government in today's world is what makes the difference. Capital is mobile, technology is mobile, but the one thing that isn't is the quality of government, along with the quality of people and the quality of their education. So this is what we work on, and we've now built up a very substantial practice. And as I say, it's a great honor to be working in Angola now with the president, because I have, high expectations of what can be achieved there.
From your own admission, the importance of Africa will shape the world. Within the continent, the role of Angola can play is quite substantial. However, enormous domestic challenges have impeded Angola from being more present in the economic integration agenda. The richness of the country in terms of both human and natural resources, its young urban population and aspirations, and the geostrategic location of the country have allowed it to dream big. provide the right policies to attract talent, to attract capital, to attract investments, we can bet the country is going to be quite an important player. It is already an important player, but it can be a much bigger player. President Lourenço has been designing a policy reform that requires enormous efforts at a time when the global environment is not so favorable. His commitment to introduce more transparency and fight rent-seeking behavior has been noticed worldwide. So let me turn to President Lourenço now.
So, President, we know about your efforts, and it's important that you could explain to us. Could you please spell out which are your main priorities of social economic transformation in your country? Thank you very much. Since we stepped into the government at the end of 2016, we have been implemented a very important set of deep changes with the aim of the change of the business environment. The priority is the private sector to convert it into the engine of the current economic growth. We are working towards a true structural change of Angolan economy so that it will become less dependent on oil. And that is why we need to have strong institutions, trustworthy institutions with a dynamic market and efficient market economy. In this regard, the reforms which are ongoing are based in two main pillars. The first one is the identification of its real rule of law to give the trust, both international and national domestic investors, and the consolidation of the economy based on the bidding and healthy bidding system and the openness of the country to the investors. We've defined the fight against corruption and impunity as one of our main priorities. And so that we have called upon the society to really unroot these practices. And with that, we can give more confidence to the investors. From the macroeconomic point of view, the government has started significant reforms at the fiscal tax reform area with a process of tax reform, which has allowed us to become the process of public debt more sustainable. At the exchange also level with a major exchange political or policy reform, which started from an almost fixed exchange rate to a more flexible exchange rate and more adjusted to the market conditions. So this fact, combined with the opening of the capital account, which allows to have the inflow and outflow of capitals from the country without the previous authorization of the central bank, allows a higher attractiveness of international investments. With regards to the sector of the economy, we have also started to create very specific measures to allow the economic growth, both approved and implemented different instruments we've approved and using to increase the national production and the diversification of the economy, and also to grant support to the production, the diversification of exports in replacement of the imports. Also, we have approved a set of tax measures to benefit the business owners who are investing in Angola and those who are willing to invest in Angola, as it is, for example, the reduction of the industrial tax from 30 to 25%, and also the reduction for the agriculture and similar sector from 15 to 10%. The government has created and approved also a set of programs of privatization, a very bold, ambitious program of privatization of more than 195 companies and public entities, which constitutes a set of opportunities which is going to boost the economy, some economy sectors from the cattle raising, agriculture, telecommunication, oil, and the financial sector for those who would like and would decide to invest in our country. Also, we've changed the laws as a private instrument of the public and private partnerships. That was in 2010. And also, we have created the regulatory agency of the bidding process and also the approval of the bidding law, which we believe is going to greatly contribute to the attractiveness of investments in the different sectors of the economy.
Presidente, pela sua apresentação,
So, President, from what you have said, we can see there is a very full set of policies, a full program which sees really your view in terms of macroeconomic, the attractiveness of investments, which are very important policies. You've listed them in your presentation. My question is, what is, President, the difference that Angola can make with regards to other destinations for investment? Because investors have many different choices. In fact, they are paying close attention to the reform you are still doing and you have made, especially those that you have just mentioned with regards to your country. But which could be the additional aspect that could attract more investments to Angola, in your opinion? As I said, Angola has a huge potential of natural resources still to be explored. This potential of natural resources, they go from the extractivist industry and also fishery, tourism, water, energy, logistics, civil construction, among other sectors. Therefore, we would like to invite the private sector, which is present here today, to embrace the business opportunities that our country offers to invest, for example, in the agribusiness, in fisheries, to install different kind of plants in the building construction and the recovery of infrastructure, such as roads, bridges, the use also of water resources, the distribution of electric energy, and also the network of water supply, airports, ports, touristic facilities, hospitals, and that you can help us to transform Angola in a prosperous country and modern country, which is able to offer its people and the world the best living conditions.
Tony Blair, you heard the president. You have been often in the driver's seat yourself, as you mentioned. You have also shared your approach to management and the culture of results with many leaders, including many African leaders. What would you say are the key ingredients that can consolidate a change culture, an efficiency-driven mentality in the public sector, while introducing focus and also prioritization, which is basically what countries have to struggle with? And from the presentation of the president, one can feel there is a need for such enormous punch to make things happen in the way they should.
Yeah, I think what the president's just outlined are some of the key ingredients for attracting investment into your country. So the private investment law that the president has introduced changes a lot of the rules that were restrictive of foreign investment. There's obviously been a big push on issues around procurement. The country, Angola, set itself very ambitious targets now for diversification of its economy. So it's attracting investment into agriculture, construction, mining, tourism. So I always say to presidents that I've worked with, you know, the lessons of what succeeds with foreign investment are not hard to are not hard to discern. Predictable rules, rules that are fairly applied, laws that can be enforced, but enforced fairly and properly, and the creation of an environment in which it's clear that those that come into the country to invest are made welcome, do not face unnecessary bureaucratic or regulatory obstacles. And once they come in and invest, they are also then, there is some aftercare. You know, the investments are followed up, and the government actually works with the business sector to make those investments successful. But obviously also infrastructure is important, access to electricity at reasonable prices. And then I think one of the things that Angola offers today is that it's a large country with enormous potential outside the traditional energy industry. And you know, I think what's very obvious, talking to the president, and you know, I've talked to him obviously privately as well as listened to what he says publicly, is that there's a genuine commitment to bring this investment into the country, and a recognition that with that investment will also come first-class management skill, the ability to produce other consequential benefits for the country. And so I think, you know, as I say, if you look at what attracts investment into countries, and there's a lot of capital looking for places to invest today. You know, we live in a world in which there's not a shortage of liquidity. So people are looking for the right investments to make. But it really is important for a country to establish that, as I say, predictable environment of transparency and also efficacy that allows investors to have confidence.
Mr. President, we've noticed you have fought very much with the different tax reform, and also due to the decline of, your fiscal position has experimented a decline due to the decline in the proceeds from oil exports. Early in your tenure, you have declared the need for economic diversification, specifically the potential to make Angola the phenomenal agricultural potential and industrial potential that it was for the sub-region some decades ago. There are several African countries with the same diversification ambition, and we know that success are rare, although possible and desirable. So my question to you is the following. In which sectors does the government plan to diversify and to develop? And how do you intend to do this in a sustainable manner to be able to make of Angola the magnet at the agricultural and industrial level? So Angola has approximately 32 million inhabitants. About 66% of our population is young, under 25 years of age. The youth is the major asset of Angola. That is the great importance we give to investments in areas like education, development, for example, through teacher training programs and academic programs. The unemployment levels are relatively high that we are experiencing today in Angola come as a result of the financial and economic crisis, which started in 2014, affect especially our young people. This is why the programs which tend to diversify our economy will contribute to increase employment and, as a consequence, to the levels of the income of our population, especially, as I said, to the young population. We want to bet in a comprehensive and good quality education, in the diversification of the economy of our country, and with that we will improve the employment opportunities for the Angolan youth. And at the same time, we will be creating the right conditions for an increasingly more sustainable and inclusive development. We will be transforming our potential of natural resources with qualified labor, able to face the challenges of the future.
Tony Blair, from the President's presentation, it is clear that the focus is on modernizing the economy. He expresses hopes that are achievable, even though the current macroeconomic environment is tough. There is an IMF negotiated reform package, certainly necessary to instill market confidence. But many analysts also believe there is a need for a more response to the demands, demand-driven policy. The constraints faced by internal consumption market are quite severe. As we know, they were already severe before the pandemic. The pandemic impact has just increased the severity. And they are stalling small and medium enterprises, as well as large Angolan business with constraints such as access to finance, fiscal position, etc. So the question that I wanted to ask you is, from your experience, how can Angola navigate these difficulties, and what would you recommend the country prioritize in order to attract investment under such circumstances? In other words, how are you and your institute supporting Angola in becoming an emerging investment destination in the continent?
So the challenge is always getting the need to show short-term benefits to your people aligned to the fact that many of the reforms will take time to work. So there's a long-term benefit, but the expectation that people have is immediate. So the most important thing is to show a strong direction of travel. And what we will be working with the Angolan government is around investment promotion, but also around making sure that the things that, for example, the private investment law are going to bring about, that those things are actually implemented. And the COVID has obviously created an incredibly difficult environment for governments to work in. First, because of the disease itself, and secondly, because of its impact on energy prices and oil prices. So it's a massively constraining context. On the other hand, everything that was there before COVID is going to be there afterwards, but accelerated. And so I think there are reforms on the investment side, but also in areas like education and infrastructure, which can be done. But it's a question of making sure that you prioritize how you mix together those things with a short-term impact and those things that are necessary long-term reform. So in the countries in which we work, attracting investment in can be it can be a 4 or 5 year process. But there are changes that you can make in the immediate term that give you confidence that those reforms are going to work and signal to the country that there's a real, the government has a plan and it's executing that plan. And even if it takes time, the objectives will be achieved. And that is, that's the challenge for people at this moment, because they're having to do this, and Angola's having to do this with the problems we all know about and confront. But my experience is, both myself in government and in the countries we work in, is that on the investment side, if you really do signal that the reforms are going to be implemented and people can see them coming into effect, you can at least get significant parts of this investment underway reasonably quickly. And, you know, this is a situation in which I think Angola, like many other countries, is going to find the next year very, very difficult. But if it can make a real impact with that reform program, then I'm confident there are a lot of people who will look at Angola, as indeed this conference shows, who are going to look at Angola and think, well, it's moving in the right direction, and it's worth taking a bet on that investment, because we can see the government is doing what it said it would do. And once that credibility is established, it becomes a lot easier both to attract the investment and to get it into the country quicker.
President, from Mr. Tony Blair's words, it is very clear that there are some short-term actions which have an immediate effect in the building up of this credibility. And this credibility greatly depends on the determination of showing this determination. Whatever is being promised, you have to deliver. That is in terms of investments, and this determination to also bring predictability, which investments like predictability to reduce risks. And with that, they will feel more at ease to start making these kind of great investments. From your actions, President, you've shown this determination, but could you please add on some other ideas that you have to continue in these pathways to really to prove that the attractiveness of Angola for investments is something that is here to stay? So I can give you this guarantee to the foreign investments or investors that the business environment in Angola is improving day after day. Both the reforms we have started to implement, these are here to stay. It's not something that it has been done specifically and is going to be finished. No, it is an ongoing process. It's something that we are going through it every single day. And every single day we're going to face small hurdles. And we're going to try to remove them for the foreign investors to feel more comfortable. So we're going to take all the necessary measures in terms of legislation. Also, if there is a need to change it to make the investments come in here, we're going to do that. The fight against corruption at all levels, from the major type of corruption to the small daily life corruption, we are fighting this. So this fight against corruption is going to carry on. We're not going to give up. And also investment incentives. We're going to carry on discovering new incentives for the foreign investors to be able to help us in our economy, and that they can bring their capital to the Angolan economy. If you allow me, in what you have said before, Mr. President, and the youth, the fact that the average age of Angolan population is one of the youngest in the whole world, if I'm not mistaken, is about 16 years of age. Most of the Angolan population, obviously, there's a great bet in the future, which is a huge potential, because with such an enormous amount of young people, you will be able to adapt yourself to new ways of consumption, new ways of work, and also to tap on those opportunities which are offered with dealing in a different way with environment. For example, making the green industrialization to make the best of the renewable energies. And Angola also has a huge potential in this area, which has been hidden away from the oil industry. Your idea of diversification, your idea on the large amount of young people, they are all going the same direction. I mean, these ideas for a deep reform of the country. So if you had to give a message, a strong message to the investors, who is going to be your answer after COVID? Because COVID has brought us so many disruptions and concerns in our minds, which will be that indication, that signal you will give investors? Our response after COVID will be to recover the time we've lost throughout this long time with COVID, the lost time in all the different sectors. We're talking here about investments, the foreign private investment. Obviously, in this sector, we're talking about this specific type of investment. So the environment is being built. I mean, it is being built as we speak. And as long as we have new opportunities, they will be very much welcomed into Angola. We're here with open arms to welcome them when it is possible to have them here again. So with regards to the extremely young population in Angola, it is a capital and very important capital we have, and we have to use it to our favor. To have a young population, it is good. We have a guaranteed labor, although we are aware that we need to bring large investments for the education of this young population. They have to be well trained, well prepared for the market or for the employment market. But the investors and the investments will help us to do that on the training, on the education, at the high school settings, also at the university setting, but also on the job training. So once they are already employed, I mean, with that, these young people will be qualified to serve the industries in which they will be working. Mr. President, here I have some questions that we've received for this session today. One of them has to do with the special economic zones, which was an experience which was very much successful in China and in some Southeast Asian countries and also in some other areas in the world. And one of the sponsors of this conference, which is African Finance Corporation, it is very much determined to develop in countries like Gabon. And I would like to know what is your reaction for this type of industrialization to come from the special economic zones? As long as this type of investment will contribute to increase production of goods and services, as long as this type of investment will contribute to increase the employment offer, it is always very much welcomed. We are being contacted now, and we're going to give all the information needed.
And one question for you, Tony Blair, also from the panel of questions that I have received, relating to how do you feel the experiences of one African country can be shared with another African country? And is your institute actually facilitating that type of connectivity that is very welcoming for learning and for improving in a regional collegial atmosphere?
Yeah, so one of the things we do as an institute is we work, for example, on things like special economic zones. So we have projects in 2 or 3 countries that involve those types of investment encouragement, and therefore it's very important to connect those that have already had experience of doing this with countries that might want to have experience. But we also try to distill the lessons of what works and what doesn't from around the different countries. And that can mean, for example, in areas like we've just been talking about, which is education and training. So there's no doubt in my mind at all that there are very clear lessons now of what works in terms of education reform in developing countries, how you improve the quality of skills and training, and that's so important with a young population. And then there are, even though every country's context is different, the actual lessons of governing are very much the same. They're all about this idea of prioritizing and then making sure that you track what you're doing. You don't just make the promise, you track that it's actually being delivered. And I think there's no doubt at all when you for example, the promotion agency for Angola, the IPEX promotion agency, making that a really effective instrument of going out, promoting the country, bringing people in, and then looking after that investment is incredibly important. And the other thing I would say is this, that one of the things that we've learned from the countries we work in is that part of the importance of getting investment in from abroad is not just the capital, but it's also the know-how. And it's, some of the best training, for example, in the tourism area, if you get people who've run successful businesses from around the world investing in your country, they don't just bring the investment, but they also bring the knowledge and the skills and the expertise that can make, can then help the indigenous industry of the country to grow. And again, these are very, very clear lessons from around the world. The one other thing I would say is that, and I think COVID has brought this home to everybody, the application of technology is going to accelerate in every single aspect of our lives, including in developing countries. And so I think seeing how technology can accelerate your development is also a critical task for developing countries. And that is in the use of data, in healthcare, in education, in energy. There are many, many ways, financial payments. There are many ways in which technology today is playing a role in developing countries, in allowing them to develop faster and better.
President, we haven't covered very much this question of the digital economy and the investments needed also in order to Angola to be really to have this ability to use the digital economy in a more significant manner. Would you like to say something on this particular topic? Yes, very briefly, I would like to say that we also need to pay attention to this digital need, because it's not only the future, the present is already digital. The companies around the world today, they are on the top because they've really invested very heavily on the digital aspect. So with regards to Angola, we're no different. We're very much paying attention to the need of doing even much more on this digital world. And also, Mr. President, I would like you to to give us like a final remark. It is a conference on investors, but also of people representing what we can call the public opinion, people who work in the media, people working in the formulation of ideas through this conference and this opportunity we've had to interact. I would like to know from you, which is the message you would like to give us, not more specifically on Angola, because we've spoken very widely on Angola and its potential in investments, but on Africa. How do you see us navigating this difficulty after the pandemic? Well, as you know, Africa, it may be the continent with regard to which there were lots of pessimistic view with the consequences of COVID-19. Luckily, that very pessimistic prognosis, which started at the beginning of all this pandemic, and the ability of Africa to face COVID-19, I mean, it was different. That pessimistic prognosis wasn't confirmed with the levels of infection. They're not that high. Africa learned its lesson, what we need to do. We need to invest even more on healthcare. We need to train more people on the healthcare sector, nurses and doctors. We need to invest in labs, in analysis lab, because at the end of the day, pandemics and epidemics in our country and in our continent, it's not only this one, it's not the only one, it's only COVID-19. COVID-19 has been all over the planet, but in Africa we've had other pandemics which had only covered our continent. I'm talking about the Ebola, I'm talking about others who had been devastating for our continent. Therefore, as Africans, we stand together in this fight against COVID-19, but we are completely aware that we need to prepare ourselves much better to face future pandemic and epidemics which naturally will happen in the future. This is something that is cyclic. COVID-19 is one more among the pandemics that the planet has suffered. So therefore, Africa needs to be better prepared.
And with those words, I really would like to thank President João Lourenço and Tony Blair for their participation and for generous time with us. I want to thank you on behalf of the organizers, Invest Africa, and also all the participants. We look forward to bringing another investor mission to Angola and to hosting you in London, President, once the travel restrictions are lifted next year. So it will be an opportunity for another interaction that I'm sure people will be very happy to participate in such an opportunity. And I would like really to mention that the post-COVID world is going to bring us a lot of changes, a lot of disruption, but also a lot of opportunities. And I think what has been demonstrated during this conversation is that we should not give up, but we should be mindful of the need for even further prioritization and focus. Thank you.